facts. Yesterday, Judge, this defendant methodically began an evil plan of mass murder and rape in the city of Brockton, targeting victims that he identified as non-whites. This evil plan, by his own admission, encompassed the defendant armed with a handgun, killing as many Jews, blacks, and Hispanics as humanly possible yesterday before killing himself. He indicated he was going to kill people, hopefully until approximately 6:30 p.m. when he would enter a synagogue and kill Jewish people before shooting himself in the head. In preparation for this hate crime, just after noontime yesterday, the defendant armed himself with a 9mm handgun and 200 rounds of ammunition, both of which he had bought on the street illegally. He also loaded a backpack that had 2 sets of handcuffs, a blindfold, and a gag, along with a hammer. His first indication of police was that he was going to kill his first victim, an ex-neighbor named Selma Goncalves, by stealth, indicating the use of the hammer or perhaps his own hands. After that first murder of an innocent victim, his plan was to kill as many non-whites that he saw throughout the city of Brockton. Just after noontime, he got in his black van and headed to 103 Clinton Street, which was an address that he himself had lived at on the 2nd floor for approximately 10 years. He knocked on Selma Goncalves' apartment door, and the door was answered by her older sister. I'm not going to name her. She is a victim of a pending rape charge. This 22-year-old woman, Your Honor, answered the door. The defendant claimed that he was having car trouble and asked to use the phone. She hesitated, didn't speak English very well, so based on his own statement, he produced a gun and pointed it at her. He was able to easily overpower the much smaller woman and handcuffed her hands behind her back. At this point, he proceeded to sodomize this poor girl for 20 to 25 minutes in her own apartment. He indicated that he sodomized her on the living room floor, then moved her into the bedroom. At that point, he heard a knock on the door. Selma Goncalves, the victim's younger sister, had come home and was knocking on the door. The defendant claimed to police that when he opened the door, she was armed with some kind of sharp instrument. She saw the defendant, she saw the gun in his hand and attempted to flee. According to his statement, at this point, he shot her a few times in the back. He then returned to the apartment where the first victim, 22-year-old girl, was cowering on the floor holding a stuffed teddy bear. At this point, he shot her through the teddy bear multiple times. He then stated to police that he walked back to his van and began to reload his handgun so they continue with the killing spree. At this point, Your Honor, a couple of brave civilians get involved in the case. We have reports from an individual driving by as well as a young man on a bike that they observed the first victim come out of the house, which would be Selma Goncalves, and collapse on the roadway, suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. They, of course, ran over and tried to give her some aid. One of these individuals was white, and one of these individuals was not white. At this point, the first victim, who was raped, also was able to make it out of the apartment covered with blood. The defendant was in his van reloading his handgun at this point. According to witnesses and according to the defendant himself, while seated in the van, he then pointed the gun at the group that was offering aid to Selma Goncalves, who was dying on the sidewalk, and fired several more shots in their direction, attempting to kill the non-white person who was tending to Selma. The defendant then backed up and drove down Clinton Street, again, based on his own admissions, attempting to find more non-white people to murder. Unfortunately, he passed the second victim, a 69-year-old male identified, Your Honor, as Arlindo Pepina Goncalves, 72 years of age, who was a known homeless man in the area of Clinton Street. In fact, the defendant stated to police that he knew the homeless man from his time living there and seen him several occasions pushing a cart around filled with cans. As he pulled up to Mr. Goncalves, he slowed down, stopped his van, and by his statement, got out of the van with his handgun, walked up to point-blank range, and shot this man in the head. He said he was surprised that he didn't go down immediately and shot him a second time in the back. He then got back into his van, and at this point, because of the bravery of some civilians who followed him and got his license plate number and were actually on the phone with 911 while the second shooting took place, the Brockton police began to respond, and the GBC was put out for a black van with a particular license plate. Brockton officers responded to the scene, Judge, where they found what essentially was a bloodbath out in front of one of